Hey, 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 Nicole Roberts Jones here, and welcome to another episode of the Meaningful Work Podcast. Listen, a time we connect to give you all the tools you need to go after a life full of meaning and fulfillment. Now, listen, I think this conversation in this episode is one that we do not have often enough. And it's really looking at how do you make your money work for you, not just in retirement, but what about when you're no longer here? So I was reading as I was preparing for our guests today, and listen, according to the World Economic Forum, women outlive men by an average of 5 to 6 years. Did y'all know that? Now, I know we have a few good men that listen, but ladies, did you know? Well, you probably kind of already knew we outlived them, but here's the thing that we don't think about. As a result, our financial requirements actually exceed those of men as we spend more years in retirement. So, what do you do? Now, in addition to that, making a plan for your money as you retire, what happens again to your money when you are no longer here? How do you make sure that it creates a legacy? Well, our guest on this episode is getting ready to dig all into that. So let me introduce you to Aimee Griffin. Now, Aimee is the principal attorney of life and legacy counselors of the Griffin Firm, an estate and business succession firm committed to the creation, protection, and transfer of wealth. She is a board president and founder of the Association of Black Estate Planning Professionals. Come on, y'all. A collaborative economic empowerment organization with a mission to bridge the racial wealth gap. With a commitment to strategic community economic development for Black people, Aimee serves as corporate counsel for the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, National African American Insurance Association, and the Bow Collective. Now, listen, I can go on and on, but here's the other thing. She is committed to supporting community growth through education and speaks regularly at a national, regional, and local level to educate other attorneys in the community. Now, if that wasn't enough, she's an adjunct professor at the Western New England University School of Law and the Howard University School of Law. She's a monthly contributor to the Washington Informer newspaper, and she strongly believes we know better, we will and can do better. Now, before I bring her up, I got to tell you, she's been recognized and has received awards by local and regional associations, including the Small Business Administration as a Minority Business Champion. Aimee was awarded in 2024 Women in Business Champion of the Year by the DC Chamber of Commerce. She steadfast believes, again, that we are better together. So, y'all help me welcome Miss Aimee Griffin. Hey, girl.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me.
So excited to have you here. And again, this is a conversation that so many people don't have. We don't think about it. And I'll be honest with you. When my father passed, he didn't have a will. So I spent 3 years in probate court. So the first answer to my husband's, baby, we need to get a whole estate plan together. So let's talk a little bit before I start asking you about what inspired you. Well, let's first talk about what inspired you. What really made you want to focus on estate planning and in your practice?
Well, lawyers are, we have to tell long stories, right? so it really starts off with the fact that I am the child of civil rights activists. And so I had a good government job overseeing contracts for a state agency in Massachusetts and realized Black folks weren't getting any opportunities. And so I realized if I am leading the contracts and they're not getting opportunities, that's a problem.
Right.
So I went to law school at 40 and created the New England Black Chamber of Commerce and was part of creating the U.S. Black Chambers. But while I was running the New England Black Chamber of Commerce, I worked with a business who got contracts and we're doing all that, feeling like, okay, we got this. The man died. The owner died. Nothing in place. Nothing in place. So it was like having a fire sale for all of, for this construction company, just this stuff. Yeah. And so I realized then that there's so much more than that's required, especially of business owners, to not just, make money, but to be able to keep it and plan for multiple generations.
Right.
So that's why I went back to school and got my Master of Laws in Elder Law and Estate Planning so that we can strategically plan, not just the basics, but we can do the strategic planning for multiple wealth building.
So good. So tell us, and listen, y'all, I want you to get your pen out because these are things that I didn't know. And the only reason I know now is because I had to deal with probate. And so once my father passed, and this was 2014, and I thought I'm an only child, I'm good, right? And the whole family, nobody fought me. It didn't matter. I still took me 3 years in probate court, only child, to get all of the things. Even my mother who had divorced my dad, right? I'm telling you guys all of this because I thought, oh, it's going to be easy. It wasn't.
It's one of the, I say probate is one of the greatest government scams they got going.
Oh my God.
You're paying them to get your father's stuff.
Girl. And not only just paying them, but I also had to pay the lawyer. No harm and no foul. But it took 3 years. But it took 3 years. So all the courts that I had to go through. And then what's so funny is, and I'm telling all my business y'all, but I'm saying this because I want you guys to realize how serious this is a conversation needed and necessary. My father had put one of the businesses in his name. So the board members were my dad, my mother, and his best friend. Now listen, y'all, my father's best friend was senile. So he was like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble by the man. I'm like, but you know who I am, Mr. And I was just like, oh, I said, Mommy, can you call him? My mother called him. I mean, we laugh at it now, but girl, during, I was like, Lord, he's going to make it so I can't even get the house I grew up in. So can you tell the people the difference, those that are listening, the difference between estate planning and having a will?
Oh, that's a great question, because people think that's because of TV. On TV, they have the reading of the will, which makes you think that's all you got to do is have a will that somebody reads, and then you can do whatever it says. The will directs the court process. I mean, so on one level, we're glad to have a will because we know what you want to do, but you're still just telling the court what happens. And the court first step, because as Nicole, as you were saying, it takes time. The first step is making sure that the will is valid. So they have to go through the steps to make sure that it's indeed a valid will. Then they have to put a notice in the paper that says, Aimee died, does she owe you any money? And you have to wait for the creditors potentially to come forward. Then you have to pay those people, and it's a whole mile of a ass. And it's simply, estate administration probate. So once you have an estate, you have to administer it in order to achieve the goal of distributing anything that's in your name out of your name. Right? And people don't think about it. You don't know about it. You think, I have a child. I'll never forget, a lawyer said to me, oh, I know I want everything to go to my child, but that doesn't always get there.
I'm a living witness to that. I'm a living witness, and every family member said, oh, you're your dad. We know your dad left everything to you. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but it's not written anywhere. So, and many of them were saying, why are you going to court? Well, hello, I can't just go in the house and take it.
That's right, because if your name ain't on it. And one of the things that a lot of times people think that, oh, it's my husband's, so it's going to come to me. No. If it's in your husband's name only, a portion may go to you, but a portion will go to his kids, depending on the jurisdiction, right? Because each jurisdiction is slightly different. But you don't know what you don't know, because most folks aren't looking up the laws of intestacy.
Right. And what's interesting is even if he didn't leave it to anybody, it could go to the state. So the state can benefit from a house that you have lived in, let's say for 20 years, and your name wasn't on it because you never thought to ask, because you thought, oh, I'm good. And now the state owns your house, and the state can sell it and benefit from all the years that you've put in time and amass wealth, because, the longer you live in a house, the more valuable it should be. But now the state comes in and takes it because your name wasn't on it.
That's right. And, while, how we were saying that you were the only child, so you didn't have anybody to fight with. But just could you imagine if you had siblings to fight with, right? And then I always say our siblings are great. It's just those people they marry.
Hello.
And that if you want to keep that family home, and one of the spouses say, no, we need some money. We need that $2,200, right? And then they force a sale of the property. All of that can happen if you don't have a structure that creates the rules to oppose it.
Right. And literally that kind of did happen to me with my father's best friend, who, again, I'm not going to say his name because I don't even know if he's still alive, but I knew him my whole life. But again, he was senile, y'all. So he was like, I don't want the IRS to come after me. I'm like, I'm not asking you to do anything, but just to sign the house over to me, to take your name off of this organization that my father put that owned the house, which is what the father thought he was doing. That's not pay taxes. That's a whole nother conversation. So it was a whole headache. So I can't imagine if I had to deal with that with 3 or 4 siblings.
It is. And I have had so many people stop speaking to each other because of it. It's because of, okay, no, she took such and such. She wasn't supposed to have it. I gave mama money for this, right? It can be so catastrophic for no good reason, right? Yeah. And so what we know, as you were saying, is that probate, the will directs probate and estate administration. But the goal is to always bypass probate. You don't want the court in your business, because the other part about that, not only the court makes it public, so everybody anywhere can see. And here we have vultures who do nothing but just have people just read the probate filings so that they can come after the people who are grieving. It's outrageous, but it happens every day.
And I'm sure we can go on and on about this, but I want to ask you about this whole bridging the wealth gap. And the reason I want to ask you about this is because, listen, this is one conversation as a Black woman from South Central LA. Let me keep it all the way real. Again, you think I grew up in this house. Oh, it's mine. Oh, my dad is, my mom and dad passed. My mother didn't want the house. Oh, it's mine. It wasn't that simple, y'all. So that's one of, I'm sure, other things that we should be looking at when we want to really bridge this wealth gap. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, in the Black community, unfortunately, only about 26% of folks have an estate plan. So if you think about all of those folks who are able to get ahead because of what their parents left them, we're often lose ground because of what our parents didn't leave, right? Or just didn't have the order. And so when we think about especially land is one of those things. I always say all the time, property appreciates and money evaporates. We complain about gentrification, but what happens is because we didn't have the estate plan and we got three folks who got, the house was left to us. And then we want, we have to end up selling the house because we can't agree on anything. So with all of those things together, not having a plan, losing the land, then we start off back at not even at the starting point, as opposed to those people, each generation, we're moving forward. So if indeed we only have 26% of folks who are even considering planning, and I would say to you, as you started to allude to earlier, a will is not a plan for wealth building. A will is a plan to get through probate, right? But if you're thinking about wealth building, we're thinking the long game. That's 3 generations we're trying to build for. It's being thoughtful about. It's not just today. It's not just tomorrow. I always say a will could conceptually be a peaceful distribution of assets. That's not our goal, and so unfortunately, if we don't think about it any differently, we're not going to get it any differently.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that you said it's like what made me, this is horrible to say this right now when we're recording this, but it's like the peaceful transition of power, right? So, but even look, we're not going to touch that. We're not going to touch that.
We're leaving that right alone.
Right. But that's what popped in my mind when you said that. And I love that you said property appreciates and money evaporates. Right.
You've seen those shows, Nicole, the reality TV shows where lottery winners at the beginning, they get this big check and at the end they have nothing, because the money that you work for has a different value than money that's just gifted to you, just left to you, right? If you're not used to managing money, you're not going to learn it all of a sudden, right? And so an inheritance is a lot like a lottery winnings. All of a sudden you just get this chunk of money, right? And so just like the lottery winners, again, lottery winners are 4 times more apt to file bankruptcy than a typical person.
Oh, that's deep. 4 times.
4 times.
And how many? And sorry, go ahead.
And so if you're not used to having $1 million, I think about life insurance. If you get that $1 million life insurance check and you're used to living off of $47.50, you're going to run amok. You're going to live large, as opposed to those folks like Warren Buffett, who really don't need to do all that because he ain't trying to prove anything to anybody, because he know what he has.
So good. When you were talking, what I was going to say, look, because you got me thinking, it made me think of MC Hammer, came right in my mind, y'all. So those of you that don't know who MC Hammer is, first of all, where you been? But he had so many dancers. He had so many people that he was paying for, and he didn't make a plan. He wasn't being strategic with his money. And just like the lottery winners, you get the money. And I always say money is energy. So you get so excited and you spend it all, and you don't realize that your bank is depleting. Your bank account is depleting. And that's, I believe, what happened to, I believe MC Hammer had his heart in the right place, but he thought his bank account was unlimited, and that's not real.
And that's, what we think about is creating a plan for everything. Like with our business plan, we create a plan, estate plan, right? So that it's not just about me, it's for my kids and my kids' kids, whether they're biological kids, or whether they're community kids, because we have an opportunity to impact multiple generations. But we've got to have a plan to do it. It's not just going to happen by default.
So what practical steps can individuals take to begin building their wealth and crafting a meaningful legacy with their money?
first of all, take an assessment, right? Start off with what I say to people all of the time, if you don't have an estate plan, when you pass away, you create a scavenger hunt for your loved ones.
Right.
You don't know what is, it used to be that we could just sit in the house and bank statements would come. That doesn't happen anymore because most of this stuff's online, right? You get digital assets. So you would never know what the assets are. I had a circumstance when a probate that we supported a gentleman through. He got a foreclosure notice on the house he didn't even know his mama owned.
Wow.
So and so that's money that was wasted. But we get to be thoughtful and planful, not just for me, not just for my kids, but for my kids' kids. And so we need to be thoughtful about how do we make sure that it's not just going all out at once. But what I encourage people to do is if you have, like, say you have 3 kids, and most people oftentimes will say, I'm going to divide my assets into 3, and each one gets a third. I don't encourage that. I say, let's create a collaboration, because we know that the mass is better than a third of it. And so we can create an opportunity for the all of the masses to come. I say either divide and disseminate or create and collaborate. And so that we enable our children to invest together, build together. And if they don't have if they're not responsible, we don't give it the responsibility, right? But then also don't distribute all of the money. Let's keep the money and the income in the trust so that you can give distributions based on the income. We're not trying to support them unless there's a catastrophe. But if they're able-bodied, they should support themselves. We want to give them the resources they need to do anything they want, but not so much that they can't do anything.
Right. So take an assessment. You said take an assessment. So where do we take this assessment, and what does the assessment tell us?
What are all of your assets? And what are your liabilities, right? Now, I'm really a big advocate on how do we protect the assets and how do we mitigate the liabilities, right? So, but we need to be aware, because if we don't know what's out to get us, right? We want to make sure that we're very clear about what we're passing on. Because if we're setting up that next generation or the next generation, we have to create a plan based on what the assets and liabilities are, right? And so understanding what it is, making sure that you have a strategy to mitigate liabilities such as taxes, because there are different jurisdictions have different tax laws, right? So if you don't know if there's inheritance tax in your state, or if you have assets that exceed the estate tax exemption limit, you need to know that and plan accordingly, because we can mitigate what we know, right? And so also being really honest about the people that you love. There are folks who, if Pookie's your oldest child and Pookie ain't never balanced a checkbook, always need to have a little something to help to get through the week, that's not the one to put in charge of your money.
Hello. Right.
But having the hard, honest conversations about those things, and then not believing that someone's going to all of a sudden step up if they haven't stepped up in all of this time, right? So be looking at what your assets are, looking at the people that you love, and then creating a strategy with a trusted advisor that can indeed know the law, right? And so I say this to people all the time, that you can, people can make 4 choices. 1, do nothing. 2, do it yourselves. Aretha Franklin did it herself, and we know what a mess that was. Then you can do the Susie Orman or the willsandtrust.com and not have any legal guidance. And so sometimes you're playing the Russian roulette kind of thing, or get a trusted advisor, which is what I recommend. Find someone who you like, because, if you don't like him, you always try to be impressive. If you like somebody, you can tell them, oh no, my child's a mess. Right. And you feel comfortable having that conversation, but you need to have someone that you can feel completely honest with. I've had people say to me, well, there is an outside child. Right. So it is all of those things are valid, but we've got to make sure that you feel comfortable enough to have the conversation so that the people, will truly can help shape the plan that you want. Right. to create wealth. The other thing is, there are a lot of times you'll meet a financial advisor who does not listen. And so they just think that, you don't have a whole lot, you don't have enough to really make a grandiose plan. If they are worth their salt, they will say, let me help you strategically plan to make it build from generation to generation.
That's good. That's so good.
Because, that's one of the things about the wealth gap, because typically, the billionaires who are white versus the billionaires who are black, there's a whole different different stratoscope, right, of what exists, but every single one of us can create a strategy that has a legacy impact. If someone tells you differently, that's not the person to serve you.
That's so good. And I will tell you, so I love that you said if there's an outside child. So when my husband and I, look, you guys are, I'm transparent. So when we sat down, because I have 2 bonus kids, when we sat down and really looked at planning our estate, we really looked at how are we going to, when both of us are gone, right? First, we looked at if one passes before the other, we made a plan for that. And then making a plan for when we're both gone, what happens after that. And even when his children get whatever they're going to get, in case they listen, I'm not going to say, so y'all don't start calling me tomorrow, right? So whatever they get, what they get, then we have grandchildren. So it's really planning out everything. So I like to call it, when I was talking to our lawyer, I called it a SWOT analysis. Now, many of you guys know what SWOT analysis are. We do them for our businesses. When I'm working with my clients, I do it for your personal life. But really, I think we should do a SWOT analysis on everything, including your estate. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. So where are there opportunities that you could do things with your money that you never even thought about? Ooh, the stuff that my husband, we were like, oh, never thought about that, right? And then threat. The threat is if you do nothing, that's the number one already, right?
That's right.
So tell us, what do you see the biggest challenges? You've said quite a few, but is there anything else that I haven't asked around challenges in regards to this wealth gap, or even the building your plan?
The reality is that sometimes people get fearful that they have to be equal. They have to treat their children equally. Now, I am not a believer in treating your children equally. There are a number of things that you should factor. Now, if you have children who don't treat you with respect, they don't get the benefit of the same thing that child who does care for you. Right. And again, I don't say that all kids are equal. And I don't say that we define our family by medical or legal relationships. Right. It's people who love you and treat you well. And so we need to be thoughtful about who is the network that we have that we care about. Then the other part that encourage people to be thinking about is the strategy over time. It's hard to think about the really rough stories, like thinking about what happens if I truly am incapacitated. What does that really look like? And who can make the hard decisions?
Yeah.
And don't just pick your spouse because they're your spouse. My husband, I love dearly, and he would have a really hard time pulling the plug. Right. And so understanding what does that look like. But I also know when you're a blended family, I'm a blended family, that he needs to understand, and my daughter needs to understand, and my son needs to understand, so that nobody's mad at each other, because these are my decisions. And I'm not trying to make them based on what anybody else wants, but what's the life that I want to live, right? So I get to make those decisions. And we want to make sure that we're respecting the relationships at all times. Right. And so I think about all the time. For example, we had a client who the husband died. He had the house before he got married. And so when he died, because his name was the only name on it, his wife had to sell the house because she got half and his son got half. We encourage people to say, one, we don't want you to be homeless, right? Even if the house is going to go to the son after the fact, it can happen after the second one passes away. We believe that your spouse is the first priority. Make sure they're okay, and then plan accordingly. Everything in decency and in order. Right?
Yeah.
but we got to plan for it. But we still are looking for that multiple generations. And so while I say the spouse is good, I say all the time to my husband, if I die first, I know that Sister Sue's gonna come home be leaving the church saying, "I know Aimee didn't cook for you like this."
Okay.
And we'll be there but we need to, what I say, pull boy and bimbo clauses that make sure that the stuff that you put in place stays in place. You have that opportunity, but only if you know about it.
Right.
And sometimes one of the things that it's really important is that we don't always believe that we know the best. And we trust the attorney. But if it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not right.
Yeah.
It is clearly, I've had too many folks come to me with their estate plans. And it's like, well, I don't really know what it says. That's not okay.
Wow. So good. So good. You've given us so much to think about. Y'all, I got a page of notes, right? So look, and I have an estate plan now. I'm about to go pull it out and make sure I got all the stuff I want in it because she got me thinking now, right? So thank you, Aimee, for your commitment for going back to school because you saw a need, you saw a gap. And here's the thing. Many people say, oh, but somebody needs to know. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? And that's exactly what you did when you went back to school to stand in the gap. And then you even went back to school again to stand in the gap again. So thank you for your commitment to bridging the wealth gap. Thank you for giving us such great insight. Is there anything else you want to say as we close this episode?
You know, what I encourage people to do is who's ever watching this, if you don't have your stuff straight, I'm not saying come to me. Go to someone that you trust. Don't pause, because you know what? This is what I'm about to say is tomorrow's not promised for any of us. And so, I've had people, I'll never forget, I was doing a presentation and I said, so how old should you be when you have your first estate plan? And as clear as day, this woman said 80 because she was 80 and didn't have her estate plan straight.
Wow.
Right? But it is, everybody knows somebody who passed away before the age they are now.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to stop and think and plan. But again, don't think about it as planning for my demise. Plan for the generation of your children's children's children.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it exciting and fun for me, is that we're building that legacy that we can change the world, but for the people that are in our lives. And some people won't even know that has such a huge impact, but we can do that if we choose to.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for making sure we choose to. I appreciate you, Aimee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for all that you're doing and making sure that people live meaningful lives.
I appreciate you. Thank you, girl. So good. So good. Listen, I could talk to her for the next hour. So if you don't have your plan, it's time to make a plan. If you cannot look, of course, you can look up Aimee. I will put her web address at the bottom of in the show notes. And know that she serves certain states. So make sure you're in one of the states that she serves in. But if not Aimee, find a qualified and caring professional to help you make a plan, not just for retirement, but for what happens after retirement is complete and you are no longer here, so that your money can still bless all the people that you love. So with that said, thank you for joining us for this episode. Number one, share value you got out of this conversation below. And number two, you know what I'm going to ask you to do? Share it, because somebody in your neighborhood, what's neighborhood? Network, virtual neighborhood, network, somebody in your community needs this conversation to get their estate planning and their legacy in order. All right. So I'll see you for our next episode. Thank you again. Talk to you soon.